and being bribed by big oil to tell lies about the Great Barrier Reef and climate. Actually, it's even worse than that.
Who funds you? Who funds you? Who funds you?
I'm also being paid by big coal and big nuclear, and so is every other climate skeptic. I know this because my opponents tell me it all the time, but it raises an interesting question about who funds what and by how much, and why do people make these, quite frankly, ridiculous accusations? I mean, I've been waiting on the phone for 2 decades for a call from big oil, and it never comes. It would be rather fun to be tempted. So, all you big oil executives who all watch my videos, how about it? Make it come true.
Who funds you? Who funds you? Who funds you? Who funds you?
The question then becomes, why is he so bloody keen on convincing the world that the Great Barrier Reef is a paradise in perfect state of nature? It's been funded over the years by the likes of Gina Reinhardt and companies like Shell, ExxonMobil.
Now, that would all be okay if I was actually living the high life on big oil. But it's also fine to question the funding of research. After all, I would argue that the tens of billions of cash that are spent each year on climate doom science to tens of thousands of scientists might affect what the science institutions do and say. But in the end, a scientific argument is about data and logic and the quality assurance systems behind the work. The trouble with the way that the funding allegation is used, and this is on both sides of the argument, is that too often it's used as an argument stopper to avoid having to deal with the data and the evidence. So, for example, if I say the Great Barrier Reef has record amounts of coral, The Guardian just says I'm being paid, and that's it. No need to argue anymore. Somehow the record amounts of coral now becomes irrelevant. And there are many forms of this argument that are used in the culture wars. If you want less immigration, well, you're a racist. End of argument. If you argue that Australia or America are great countries, you're a white supremacist. Even if you're black. End of argument. As a child, do you remember arguing something with some other child who just gets upset and calls you a name or an or something, just to avoid the facts? Well, this is the same thing. And in a similar vein, when somebody asks you, do you believe in climate change, they may well be not asking you about the scientific evidence, they're actually asking you about your morality. If you say no, you're on par with a child molester or a concentration camp guard. There is no redemption and no conversation is possible. You are evil and that is it. And it pervades academia. So I, over many, many years, have been completely incapable, or the other side has been unwilling to engage in an argument with my views, say, on the Great Barrier Reef. And that suits them, that they don't actually have to argue.
Nice cherry picking there, Peter. Still getting paid by Gina?
Payment made for this.
You're a sycophant and fraud.
But why don't the oil companies pay virtually any climate skeptic? I think there's a couple of reasons. First, the fact is that despite all the huffing and puffing about net zero, the oil and coal companies, they're doing very well, record sales of both. I suspect they think the whole thing is just a whole bunch of expensive virtue signalling. They ignore it and keep making money. Eventually, people will just worry about something else. Now, the second reason is that... Bazza from ExxonMobil. That was quick. You sent me an email. Yes. A new Ineos Grenadier. Cool car, but I've already got a real Land Rover Defender. It's old, but it's fine. Well, she's nice, but I've already got one of those. She's a bit older. I mean, she's a bit more mature. No, Bazza, you're just not getting it. Go away and have a think. I'm just a bit busy right now. Well, I was about to say that the second reason is that, well, what's the point? The research that the skeptics do is ignored anyway, and if it's actually funded by big oil, it will be doubly ignored if that's possible. Now, I think that's actually a very bad argument. If one sticks to basic data and basic facts, most people will have an open mind about the funding and not necessarily buy the fact that, well, if it's funded by them, then it must be automatically wrong. They'll be skeptical, which is fair enough. So, for example, the Great Barrier Reef, when it reached record amounts of coral a couple of years ago, I contacted the main agricultural organisations about the idea of advertising the great news on social media, on billboards. After all, record amounts of coral is a gift from God if you're an industry accused of killing the reef. And I got to say, I was pretty disappointed when none of the industries would fork out, say, $1 million to do the advertising, given the size of these industries and the good publicity it would have brought. But anyway, don't get me started on the inability of many industry groups to fight in any way. And of course, the funding for the climate alarmists or the Great Barrier Reef is just utterly colossal. For example, the data I could find just on Greenpeace Australia, and the data is now a few years old, they get around $20 million a year. And then we could look at the science organisations. I've never seen an attempt to add up all the money that goes to climate change around the world, but it must be tens of billions of dollars worldwide a year. To give you an example, just for the Great Barrier Reef, which they love to say has been killed by climate change, I've estimated that around 400 million Australian dollars, say $250 million US dollars a year. And every university in the Western world has dozens or hundreds of people who are claiming to do climate science. Baz, $1 million to pay for an organisation to do audits on the Great Barrier Reef and climate. 1 million. You don't get it, do you, Baz? I'll be back. What is actually rather funny, though, is that despite the literally being outspent hundreds of thousands to one, the doom merchants aren't winning the science argument. For example, there was a Rasmussen poll in the United States which found that 60% of Americans agreed with the statement that climate change has just become a religion that's being used to control people. And I loved this old cartoon by John Spooner about my dearly departed friend, Bob Carter.
A conversation between Prime Minister Julia Gillard and climate alarmist Tim Flannery.
Tim, I'm not upset that you were so wrong about water shortages now that we are drowning in the stuff. No, I want to know why I pay you 10 times what Bob Carter gets and he still wins the argument.
Now, when I'm accused of being in the power of big oil, I rarely get an opportunity to say that, well, actually, I lost my job making comments that there was not enough quality assurance for the Great Barrier Reef or climate science. And the High Court, the highest court in the land, ruled that the university had acted unlawfully in what they did to me. But ironically, they still had a right to tell me, the university had a right to tell me, to be silent about their unlawful activity. But I have taken huge amounts of money from supporters, and I'm being serious now because I can't thank them enough. I'm incredibly grateful to all the people who donated to my legal costs when I was being fired by James Cook University. There was about 10,000 individual donations in 2 campaigns, which raised $1.5 million. I ended up being only out of pocket by about $300K. I can't thank those people enough. And I'm much happier now anyway. In the end, the argument about funding is actually secondary. In the end, there's something that trumps cash any day, and that's the truth. I don't claim to have a monopoly on it, but whatever the truth is, you can only suppress it for so long. Bazza, 100 million, 10 million a year for 10 years. No strings. Auditing organisation. And you'll throw in a fully restored Series 1. Baz, I think this is going to be the start of a beautiful relationship.
Who funds you?
Oh, I'm glad you asked that question, okay? I'm funded by nobody. I was offered a position at the IPA and I said, I'm not going to be paid by anybody because people keep on asking that question and they impugn my integrity as though I'm corrupt, all right? So I am paid by nobody. I got these questions when I was at James Cook University too, because I thought that the reef was fine, okay? People would ask, you're in the pay of the coal industry. I never accepted a cent from anybody but my university. So I am an independent person, more independent than almost any of the people here, because I am paid by nobody.
I'm delighted to hear that. You see,